Hello and welcome to you all in this third session on the architecture series. And in this session, we are going to learn about MVVM architecture. We will start this session with a brief outline of the topics that we are going to cover today. We will continue this session with the conceptual understanding of the MVVM architecture, and later on we will jump into the coding sample. We will also discuss about benefits and the demerits of the MVVM architecture, and in the last we will discuss some interview questions. So first topic in our session is issues with MVC and MVP architecture. Now you would be thinking that this session is all about MVVM. Then why we are discussing MVC and MVP architectures? So if you remember second session of this architecture series where we discussed fat view controller problem of MVC, and in the same session we left with the question that what could be a problem with MVP architecture also. So in order to understand MVVM architecture in a better way, we need to understand the problems with these two architectures, because ultimately MVVM architecture is going to solve those problems that these two architectures are having with us. So if we discuss about MVC architecture, majorly we are having three layers. One is model, second is view, and third is controller. And controller is the place where we used to write all the UI and the business logic in a single place. And due to this particular thing, our controller layer becomes very large, or you can say fat in terms of the size, and this is known as fat view controller problem that we have already discussed in the second session. Now we come to the MVP architecture. So to solve this fat view controller issue, there got introduced a new layer, that is presenter. And what we did in the presenter layer is, instead of writing our UI logic plus business logic in the same layer, that is controller in the MVC, we separated that business logic into the presenter layer. Now the responsibility of UI kit logic or all the UI related logic will go to view or the view controller layer, and whatever business logic your application is having goes to presenter layer only. So now there is a separation of responsibility between these two layers, and due to this thing our view controller becomes little bit light in comparison of the MVC. So in that way, in the MVP architecture, we solve that fat view controller issue in the MVP architecture. But now what is happening after that? So if we look into our presenter layer, it is still handling the business logic plus data and the network communication. So if we can check here, we are breaking a very basic design principle, that is single responsibility principle. So in the presenter layer, we are having the business logic also, and we are having the data and the network communications also. And in the applications where business logic is, you can say, much more heavy, in that case your presenter can also face the same issue that controller is facing in the MVC architecture. Ultimately, this layer can also become fat in MVP architecture also. MVVM architecture got introduced by two of the solution architects of Microsoft, that is Ken Cooper and the Ted Peter. So they basically introduced a new layer in this particular architecture, that is view model. And the responsibility of view model is to keep all the business logic, plus if any model to view transformation is needed, then that logic also goes inside the view model layer. And one of the simplest example of data to view transformation is, suppose you are getting date from your server as a string, and you need to display into a particular format to your user. Then that kind of transformation related logic we also write inside the view model layer only. Now major layer in MVVM architecture becomes model, view, and the view model. Now you would be thinking that if a controller in MVC can become fat due to multiple responsibilities, presenter in MVP architecture can become fat due to multiple responsibilities, then same can happen in the MVVM architecture also, ultimately with the view model, because view model is handling that business logic also, that model to view transformations also, plus network and the data communication also. Then you are absolutely right, MVVM can also have that kind of problems. And in the later session of this particular series, when we will discuss one more variant of MVVM architecture, then we will see that how MVVM is capable to handle these kind of problems. But in this particular session, we will discuss about plain MVVM only. So right now we can see that MVVM is having a kind of better separation of responsibility in comparison of other architectures, and with the introduction of view model layer, it becomes little bit better to manage your business logic in comparison of other architectures. After getting initial introduction of MVVM architecture, now it's time to take the deep dive into the different layers, their responsibilities, and how the control flow is happening among those layers. So if you look into the MVVM architecture, now major layers are model, view, or the view controller. So whenever user is taking any action, and that action is represented with the help of IB action in your code. So that action starts from the view layer and it reaches to the view controller, or it starts from the view controller itself. And once that IB action triggers, that trigger reaches to the view model in the form of event. And according to that event, this is the responsibility of view model to update the model layer. And once the model is updated, model basically notifies back to my view model. And with the help of some callback mechanism or some reactive mechanism, or with the help of some delegates or notification, view model send that information back to view controller layer. And once information reaches to view controller, and then this information get updated to the view, and this view gets displayed to the user. So in terms of the flow, it started from the view and reaches to the view model, then goes to the model, then comes back to view model, and view model basically sending data back to view controller to display to the user. In terms of the responsibility, all the UI kit stuff or all the UI related logic is basically written inside only view controller layer, and whatever business logic and whatever logic related with the model to view transformation, all the networks and the database call should be written inside the view model only. And models are basically the dumb store of the data. They don't have any logic. Only thing they are having is how they can store a particular entity data in the form of the attributes. So this is the overall structure of the MVVM architecture, and the major responsibility that is carrying out by the view model layer only, where it is keeping all the business logic and the network and the database communication. If we talk about the ownership, so view model is basically owned by the view controller. So view model will always be a property inside the view controller in your code, and the model will be owned by the view model only, right? So the only layer that is able to communicate with the model is the view model only, where in the MVVM architecture, view or the view controller cannot communicate to model directly. They always need to go through via view model. So this is one of the attribute of MVVM architecture, where to communicate or to update or to manipulate the model, you always need to go through with the view model layer. View or the view controller cannot communicate directly with the model. So this is one of the refinement from the MVC architecture, where only view model can communicate with the model in MVVM architecture. So this is the overall flow, the responsibilities and the relation between the different layers of the MVVM architecture. And once you implement the code sample, these responsibilities and this structure will become very clear to you. Till this point, you got the conceptual understanding of MVVM architecture. Now big question is when to use MVVM architecture in your projects. So for this decision, I am giving you 3 points that you can consider while taking the decision that whether MVVM architecture should be used or not. So first point is MVVM architecture is basically suitable for the bigger projects. Suppose you are having a bigger application where you need to maintain a larger code base and you need to maintain a clear separation of responsibility among all the logics. And in that case, you can opt out for the MVVM architecture. For the smaller projects, you can go for the MVC or the MVP architecture. So they will be more suitable for the smaller projects. Second point is, if in your project or in your application, you need to perform model to view transformation. That means, suppose you are getting some data from the server, and after converting that data into model, you need to perform some kind of transformation before displaying it to the user. There are two examples that is given in the diagram. Suppose you are getting date from the server into the form of a string, and you need to display user into some pre-formatted date format, or maybe you can say DDMMYY format. So in that case, you need to perform a kind of small conversion. So this is one of the simplest example. Again, one more example in the medical application where you are receiving the glucose data, and you need to plot that glucose data into some typical graph with the help of some complex logic or some algorithm. So these kind of data to view transformation, where you need to convert data into some other format before displaying it to user. So if you are having those kind of needs in your application, then you can use MVVM architecture, and where you are going to write these logic, that is view model layer only. So second point is, always remember, where if you need to perform model to view transformation, that means you need to convert your data into some specialized format before getting displayed to the user, then use MVVM architecture. Third point is, if in your project you are having some heavy business logic, right? So heavy business logic means on the data that is coming from the server or coming from the database, you need to perform some very complex or computational logic that is very large in terms of the code also. So to manage that kind of structure, you can opt out for the MVVM architecture, because it is more suitable for that kind of projects. And these are the 3 points that you can consider in any project or in any application before taking decision to opt out for the MVVM architecture.
Now you understand MVVM architecture conceptually, and this is the best time to jump into the coding sample. As a sample application, we are going to demonstrate a small weather application that basically fetches the user's current location, and on the basis of those coordinates and one weather API, it predicts the weather data. So we will start our application demonstration from the folder structure. So as we have already discussed that we are demonstrating here MVVM architecture, so we will arrange our application according to the layer of MVVM. And first layer in this particular architecture is model, second is view, third is view model, and fourth is controller. And apart from that, whatever folder structure we are having in our application are the helping directories like manager, constant, database, enums, extension, external, global, and networking. As we are discussing here MVVM architecture only, so we will be majorly keeping our focus to these 4 layers. So the very first layer in the MVVM architecture is model. So as we already discussed about the application objective, that this is the application that fetches user's current location, and on the basis of those coordinates and with the help of a weather API, it predicts the weather data. So the final response that, or you can say the final data model that we receive from that weather API is the weather response model. That is basically having 2 properties. One is response code and second is list of weather list item model. So to maintain this particular weather response model, we have to maintain some other nested models also. Like, as you can see, the list property is the array of weather list item model. So weather list item model is again having 2 properties. One is date and second is weather, that is again the list of weather data model. And this is the weather data model. So you can see this is, you can say, bottom to top structure of the response model that we are receiving from the API. So the very first thing that we need to do is to create the model required for the application, and we are using here decodable protocol. So when we receive the JSON from the API, then with the help of decodable protocol, we will convert into it the respective model. Another model that we are using is our business model. So as I have already told you that one of the condition for using MVVM architecture is when you need to convert your data model into some user representable structure, then you need to use that particular architecture, that is MVVM. So this is the final model that we are getting from the API, but to make it display to the user, we need to convert it into some different format. As you have already seen In the UI of application, that we are having, you can say, the weather condition and the date and the time for which the weather prediction is done, and one icon. So if you look into the API response, so this is not exactly what we need to display user, right? So in that case, somewhere we need to do a kind of conversion, and after conversion, the model that we will receive inside the view model will be weather cell model. So weather cell model is my business model that is having the required properties to display, that is title, description, and the image URL. So these are the things that user is interested rather than this complex model that is getting received from the API. So this task is done basically inside the view model layer. So in terms of the view, you are already clear that what we are having. We are having a table view basically, where we are using a custom cell in which we are displaying the image. This is the title, or this is can be considered as the subtitle that we are displaying in our view model, or you can consider it second line as a description that I told you as a subtitle. So this is our business model, and in terms of the view, you are already clear. This is simple table view. Now the important part of this application is your view model. So here you can see I have created a view model protocol that is not very much necessary for you, but if you want, you can create it, because what I want is whenever I receive the data from the API, I want to convert that API data into my business model. So that's why this function is responsible for that particular conversion. That's why I created that protocol, and I am assuming that whatever view model I am having in my application will be following that particular protocol to maintain a common structure throughout my application, that every time data is coming from the API, then every view model should implement this create data source method, and inside that particular function I can perform my complete logic of converting my data model into my business model. So for that purpose I have implemented that protocol, but this is not necessary for this small sample. But to maintain a good structure, it is very much advisable to follow the protocol structure, right? Now we are going into the heart of our sample, that is the view model. In the view model, what we are doing is we have created a function that is get current location. So this is my application's business logic, where what I am doing is with the help of location manager, I am fetching the user's current location. So for that I have created a dedicated singleton location manager that is having a function start updating the location. And as I have already told you that whenever you are getting data into some another class, so there are various ways to receive that data into some another class, like you can use the delegate, also you can use closer, you can use notification, you can use RxSwift. So there are multiple ways, and later on after this sample we will also discuss few ways of data binding also, right? So with the help of get current location, what I am doing is I am fetching user's current location, and when I am receiving the location, right? So because I am using RxSwift here, so I have subscribed this location object from the location manager into my view model, right? And with the help of this subscription, whenever I am receiving that location object, then with the help of this location object I am passing that latitude and longitude to my network manager fetch weather for API. So try to understand this flow. Inside my view model I have created a get current location function, and this function basically calls the location managers start updating the location, and once location get received, we will discuss this logic later. Once location get received, I am subscribed to this location object into my view model, and once I receive this location object into the callback into the response block, then I am using this location object in the form of latitude and longitude, and I am calling my API from the network manager. Now let's take a look into the manager class where I am fetching the location. So going into the location manager class, removing the breakpoints because they are not needed now. I put them for the debugging purpose only. So here you can say this is the implementation of the location manager. So I have used RX Swift, little bit of RX Swift here because this is one of the trending style of making reactive data receiving pipelines. So I have created the location object as the publish object that will be containing CL location type object. So this is a kind of you can say emitter for the CL location object, and this is the simple code of the location manager. We are not going to discuss this in a detail here. And once I receive the successful location, then what I am doing is, with the help of this publish subject, I am emitting my location object. And as you can see that my view model is basically observing this particular location object with the help of this subscription block. Then this logic we have already discussed, that what exactly happening. Now pay attention to the later part of this particular logic. What we are doing is, when we receive the weather response, right? So that conversion from the API response into weather response model is happening with the help of the decodable protocol. And once that conversion get completed, we are calling the create data source method. And what create data source method is doing, whatever weather response model we are having, we are converting it into the our business model, that is weather cell model, because that complex API data cannot be directly displayed into your table view cell. So you need to convert it, right? So for the conversion of that particular thing, we have created this create data source logic. So what it is doing is basically getting each and every object from the weather response list and converting it into the weather cell model. This is the logic that we have implemented here. And once that data source get completed, this logic gets back into this particular point, that is line number 29. And after that we are calling the success block. And if due to any reason my you can say that subscription, that current location getting thing or that subscription thing is getting failed, I am calling the failure block also. So this success block basically reaching to my view controller, that is home screen view controller. So once I converted the data that is received from the API into weather cell model, that is basically an array. You can see here, when we are receiving the data, we are calling the successful block, like, and in the success block we are reloading our table view, and as well as we are hiding the activity indicator also, and that all part we are doing into dispatch queue main dot async block, because this is the UI kit element, that is table view and the activity indicator. So this should always be done inside the main thread, right? So I hope right now what I am doing is I am trying to make you understand the complete flow of application, how it is working, how the structure is established. Now from the view controller perspective, try to understand the flow. When my view controller is getting loaded, or you can say the view did load is getting called, so inside the view did load, what we are doing, we are triggering that get current location function of the view model, right? And that view model structure we have already discussed. So you know, when view did load is happening from this particular screen, that is home screen view controller, it is calling get current location of the view model. And once we receive the location data successfully, we are reloading the table view, right? Now what is happening, basically we on the success we are reloading the table view. Now after that, control will reach to the table view delegates, right? And in the table view delegates, I have put the condition that I need to display only 3 objects. Maybe you can display more, but for the sake of simplicity I am displaying the 3 objects only from the weather data API. So what I am doing here is I am calling, or you can say I am setting the data into each and every cell, but I am passing the that weather cell model, right? That is created as an array inside your view model to the cell object, and inside the set data function of the cell class I am just setting the label. Now next thing is that is important in terms of the, you can say, implementation. So you are clear with the model class, you are clear with the business model, you are clear with the home view controller logic also. So we will try to conclude this particular flow from the application outward model towards the inside model, because previously what we did, we discussed from the inside to outside. Now we will try to discuss flow from the outward to inward side, right? So what is happening basically, whenever user is doing the login, home screen view controller is getting loaded and view did load is getting called from the line number 17, and after that what we are doing inside our view model, we are calling that get current location method, and once we receive the, then control reaches to the get current location method into your view model, and in the get current location method we are calling start updating location method of the location manager. And I have already shown you that we have implemented RX Swift for that monitoring, and once we receive the location object, we are having the subscription here inside the view model for the location object, and once we receive the coordinates, that is latitude and longitude, we are calling our API with the help of network manager, and we are passing those coordinates to it. And once we receive the weather response, that is getting received from the you can say codable protocol, that is converting the JSON data returned from the API into weather response model, and then we are calling create data source function of our view model class, and the responsibility of create data source is only to convert the weather response model into your business model, that is weather cell model, that how you want to display your data to table view. So this is the overall flow that is going into your application. Now we come to the coding part, right? So I know there is lots of code. There is lots of code related with UI, related with location manager, related with those callback blocks. There are multiple things. So if you need this complete sample code, you simply need to write a comment to me, or you can email to me with your you can say the tag, that is VGT : that MVVM architecture. I will definitely send you this sample code, so you can either mark it into the comment, or you can email me personally also. I can send you this sample code completely, right? So this is the overall structure of the MVVM architecture. Now let's run this application once more. So there are some other functionalities also that is not implemented right now. There is remember me also, there is login with Facebook also. They are not implemented because we just want to demonstrate that MVVM structure only. So we are just doing the simple login, test at 1 2 3, done the login. Now you can say that weather data has been populated for my current location. So this is the simple utility, and for the code definitely I can send you whenever you want. Just email me or do a small comment, right? So I hope now you are aware how MVVM architecture can be used to structure an application where you need to convert your actual data into some business data that is needed to be reflected on the user screen. And this is one of the conditions to use the MVVM architecture, right? Another important terminology in MVVM architecture is data binding. So data binding is basically when your view model receives the data, then how you are informing to your view that data has been received. So this binding is basically known as data binding, and there are different ways through which you can complete this data binding thing. So two of the example I have already shown you, that either you can use closures or completion blocks, or you can use RX Swift also. So suppose you are having some properties in your view model, or through which you are populating the data to your view controller or view, Then with the help of closures or with the help of Rx Swift observables and observer sequence, you can inform to your view that data has been received. So there are two ways that we have already demonstrated, and there are some other ways also, right? So you can use delegates also, you can use notifications, and you can use combined framework also. So these are the 5 major ways that are frequently used for the data binding purpose. So now you understand what exactly the data binding and what are the different ways to perform data binding in MVVM architecture.
In terms of clear separation of responsibility and handling the larger code base, MVVM is a fantastic architecture. It also helps us in terms of the testability, but there are some problems if it is used incorrectly without the dependency injection. So if you look into the overall performance of MVVM architecture, it is one of the amazing architecture available for the larger projects. There is one more benefit that comes with MVVM architecture is you can tie a single view model to your multiple views or the view controllers also. In that case, if you want to reflect same data onto multiple screens, then you can use same view model for all the view or the view controller screens. So these are the few benefits that comes with the MVVM architecture. Despite of multiple benefits of MVVM architecture, it is also having some issues. Number one issue is if it is used incorrectly, then it can create some problem in terms of the testability. So if you remember that structure that we discussed about the ownership, where view model is owned by the view controller and models are owned by the view model, and also the network and the you can say database manager are also owned by the view model for making the database and the network calls. So to maintain that kind of dependency structure, if it is used incorrectly, then it can create some testability problem. Second problem is multiple responsibilities are getting handled by the view model layer. So in that case, you can see that we are having our business logic inside the view model, we are doing the network and the data communication inside the view model, we are doing multiple conversions also. So you can see that the view model can easily be turned into a fat view model, right? So the issue that is having in MVC, that is having in MVP, it can come in MVVM also, but in few of the variants we are having the solution for that also, right? And third issue that MVVM architecture is having, that whatever navigation code you use to write, suppose you are having a very complex application in which you are having the multiple screens, right, where from one screen second screen is getting pushed, from second screen third screen is getting pushed, so where you are writing that navigation code inside your view controller layer. Now as we have already decided that we need to make a clear separation between each and every layer of the MVVM architecture, now what we are doing here, what we are doing is we are writing our UI code into view controller plus our navigation code inside the view controller also. So if your application is having a very complex navigation hierarchy and you are combining it with the UI logic also, then you are breaking single responsibility principle into your view controller also. So we discussed about the testability problem, we discussed about the SRP problem in the view model, that fat view model issue, and third we discussed the breaking of a single responsibility principle inside your view controller layers. This used to happen with me multiple times. Whenever I say that this has been the longest tutorial till now, then there come a tutorial that is longer than the previous one. So again, this is the longest tutorial till now on this channel, but again, learning is the priority, and I always used to say stay motivated and keep learning with us. For the latest update, follow our Facebook page, subscribe our channel, and always keep supporting us. Thank you.